Have you ever given someone a gift and you know that they did not like it? Like they're insisting that they do like it. No, it's perfect. You know me so well. But like their body language was closed off. Maybe their tone was kind of flat. They won't make eye contact. Like that tells you all you need to know, right? That's because our communication is mostly done through the nonverbal stuff. So you better believe that it's going to impact how we are in our classrooms. There are so many little tweaks that we can make that are going to like impact our instruction, our relationships, our student behaviors. So let's talk about it. So this episode is going to be very like inward facing and reflective. I don't want it to read critical of like what anyone is doing, but this is going to be for the teachers who love children, want to be better. These are going to be like strategies and tips that you can employ in your classroom, all with the purpose of like building community, bettering our relationships, improving our instruction, improving classroom management. Most of my favorite quotes that have to do with like teaching and classroom management are usually centered around communication. Like the way that we talk to our children is like it becomes like their inner voice, or students aren't going to remember like the words that you said to them, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. So if nonverbal communication does the majority of our communicating with us, obviously we need to start with that one. Let's start with talking about our tone. I couldn't think of another way to say this, so not to be corny, but our tone sets the tone in our classrooms. Like we kind of can use our tone as like our gas pedal in our classroom. You can take things up, you can take things down, you can be an active listener, you can lift up motivation and engagement all through your tone of voice. So the first step in like assessing how your tone is we have to be aware of like what is our natural like standard tone. Like to break the fourth wall, I didn't realize that my tone was kind of crazy until I saw myself on social media and I was like, wow, I kind of have an attitude when I talk. But it's not intentional, it's just the way that I like come across. So obviously realizing that was the first step for me to be like more intentional about my tone in the classroom. So you can record yourself just like passively talking to somebody in your house this summer and then like go back and watch it and kind of like assess your like standard baseline tone. Or another homework for you guys, a little exercise that we can do right now is I want you guys to imagine that you are in the classroom and you are sitting in like your rolly chair or your rocking chair at the front of your carpet and you are doing a mini lesson. You're teaching a mini lesson and there's one student, you've already told him 2 times to turn around. He keeps turning around and is like messing with the kids behind him, which by the 3rd time, he should already be moved and sitting by you, like gotten a little consequence at this point, but that's for a different episode. We're going to talk about consequences later in the series. But imagine you are really frustrated with him. It is your 3rd time redirecting him. He needs to turn around and get his life together. I want you to put yourself back in that scenario. Picture that kid that really pushed your patience last year. And think about what would you say to that student? Say it out loud. You go ahead and pause. I'll stay right here and you do that. Okay, welcome back. Now I want you to think about what is your like goal vibe for your classroom next year. Obviously you're here, you're concerned about classroom management. You want to have like the very best classroom management. How do you want it to like feel? Like what's the vibe of your classroom? Does your tone of how you just reacted in that scenario, does your tone match that vibe? Is that what you want for yourself in your classroom? Like not in like a critical way, like you could I don't think there's any right or wrong answer here, but like reflect, what do you want the vibe to be and how can we make our tones match that vibe? Sure, we all get frustrated. Sure, we all lose our patience. And that's one of the difficult things about teaching is like constantly being like in emotional control of ourselves. We're constantly on stage. We're constantly thinking about how we're coming across, but just take a second to reflect on like your tone and the way that you're redirecting. Does that align with the kind of classroom that you want? And like I said, that can be so exhausting. And I hate the phrase fake it till you make it. Like I think it's so condescending, but I do understand like the value in that statement or in that idea, because I think what they mean by fake it till you make it is like the more that you practice changing your tone and controlling your tone, the easier it will get over time. Okay, so let's talk about like our serious tone, like our teacher tone, and when we use that and what it can sound like. Having that serious vibe, like adjusting your tone to have that serious vibe, that is your teacher voice. Teacher voice doesn't mean crazy words. Teacher voice doesn't mean crazy volume. It's your tone. Sometimes finding that teacher voice, like especially in our early teaching years, comes really naturally to some of us, and some of us have a harder time with it just depending on like our personalities. But adjusting that tone, that's what's going to control your classroom and redirect behavior when you need to. So know that when I say having a serious tone doesn't mean that you're getting crazy with them, doesn't mean that you're being mean to them. It means that you mean business. So take for example, if I'm like getting frustrated with my class and I say something like, get your backpacks out, that tone is different than me saying, okay, get your backpacks out in 5. Get your backpacks out in 4. Do you see how it's different there? One of them is like, I'm losing my patience, I'm being kind of silly. And the other one is like, she's not playing anymore. She means business. Okay, now let's talk about a neutral tone. This is the one that you're gonna wanna use in those situations where you're trying to de-escalate, you're redirecting, you're giving consequences, you're having a student do correction. Like neutral is where you want to do the majority of your classroom management. So for example, you guys know that I love the strategy of going back and doing it again. And like I said, we're going to talk about consequences and correction later in the series, so stay tuned for that. But go back and do the routine again. Like when you have a lot of routines and procedures in your classroom, go back and do that again is very effective. It's brief, swift, natural consequence. Go back, try again. Go back, try it again. A kid might be arguing with me. Go back, do it again. Like there's no need to like get amped up. And if staying in that neutral tone is difficult for you, just like in general, like just as like a human being, like your personality, we're going to talk at the end of this episode of like how to like maintain emotional regulation, like when we're redirecting, when we're upset, when we're frustrated. Because yeah, I can say be neutral all day long, and some of us it just takes a lot more effort. Another tone that we can employ is called dynamism. It's technically not a tone, but we can still like be dynamic with our tone, if that makes sense. So dynamism is just like it's like the noun form of being dynamic. And I can't remember where I saw it, but there was like a whole bunch of data points for like effectiveness and like the impact as a teacher. And a teacher being dynamic, having dynamism was ranked like super high on the list. So having like a dynamic tone is going to level up your motivation, level up your engagement, level up your buy-in, level up like the energy level in your classroom. Like dynamism, I use this in my instruction a lot. It's fast-paced, it's upbeat. So like for example, at the end of a math lesson, if we just learned about long division, I might use my dynamic tone like this. Okay, let's check our learning target for long division. How did we do? And now I'm gonna go through my success criteria. Is our answer reasonable? Yes, nice job. Can you do all the steps without getting stuck? Yes. Can you identify in a long division problem which one is the divisor and which number is the dividend? Yes. So how do we do with long division today? Do you see how it's such like a mundane like task, like going over the learning target, but being dynamic like that and using success criteria, which we'll talk about later in the series, can like really lift the level of like engagement with your students. So that's a soapbox of mine. That's why I don't like room transformations. Like that should not be like the go-to for engagement. Like room transformations are fine, but as far as like engagement, like it's simple instructional practices like that, success criteria, your tone, that are going to shift like the engagement in your classroom. Like it's not sustainable to do a room transformation every day, but it is sustainable to change your tone and check your learning target at the end of class in that way. Do you know what I mean? And then like the default tone that we want to have in our classroom, which might be easy. Like I said, this is just like natural human inclination to be like, this is easy for us. This is hard for some of us. Our natural baseline should be like warm and caring. Like as teachers, no matter what your grade level is, warm and caring can look different for a kindergarten teacher versus like a 7th grade teacher. But just default, like if we are adults that love teaching, love our profession, love people, love students, warm and caring should like pretty naturally be like a good default for you. Like that's the kind of stuff that's going to build those relationships with your students. It's not like spending lunch with them every day or asking them like what their favorite food is. Like sure, those things are great, but truly building a relationship, building trust, having like a connection with your students is going to come from truly genuinely being warm and caring. So here are some watch out fors with your tone. One thing that you want to watch out for is like showing that you're losing your cool. We have a friend, like me and my husband have a friend, and whenever he gets really upset about something and he's like arguing with something, his voice gets really high, and we call it, his name voice, because like when he gets upset, he starts talking like really high and really fast, and it shows that he's like getting upset, if that makes sense. So like we want to maintain that emotional consistency, that emotional neutrality with a neutral tone whenever we do find ourselves getting upset. And again, I will talk about that at the end of the episode. But just be aware that can be like a dead giveaway that you're starting to like lose control of your classroom when your tone starts to shift like that. Another one is sarcasm. So like some of us are naturally sarcastic, like in our personal lives. Sarcasm does not work with students. It just comes across as attitude. I'm going to share some stories, like spill some tea over in the post-dismissal debrief on Patreon. I will share with you the dangers of using sarcasm with your students. But too long didn't read version, don't be sarcastic with your students. Middle school, like maybe kind of, but definitely not like younger elementary. And then I would be remiss if I did not mention that I know you guys have seen like that culture ice cube. It's not an ice cube. What am I talking about? The iceberg. If you guys look at like the iceberg metaphor, like Google images it, the iceberg metaphor for culture, it won't even say communication under the water, like the larger portion under the water. It has so many different forms of communication, body language, gestures, proximity, eye contact, all of those things are underwater. So communication is hugely cultural. So white teacher talking to my fellow white teachers and my teachers of color, please, I'm soliciting like y'all's feedback. So please check me if I'm wrong. Please add on. White teachers, we can come across sometimes as being like condescending and fake whenever we use a certain tone. So being aware of that is going to be our first step in solving that. I also encourage you guys to take the implicit bias assessment, like go to just Google and you can type in implicit bias. Sometimes our tones and other nonverbal things can give away certain biases that we have. So I'm not saying like change your tone to not reflect your bias. I'm saying go take that test to see if what your biases are regarding like social economic status or cultures or skin color, things like that. And then we also need to be aware of like what are some possible tones that other cultures may use that we might find disrespectful or aggressive or like they're not paying attention or disengaged. I'm not going to speak on what other cultures might find, appropriate, but try to do some research for your like school that you're in. All right, now let's get into body language and facial expressions. We can use our facial expressions to give like silent redirections. Mine's the classic like eyes up, lips tucked in, I'll wait face. So as long as you pair that with like routines and procedures and like what the next consequence or next step will be, a silent redirection can be really effective. And then also keep in mind that when you're redirecting, you want to keep your facial expressions like pretty neutral. For example, go back and try that again. I even rolled my eyes a little bit. See, it's so hard. Like, let me try again. Go back and try that again. But if you're trying to like minimize escalation, you want to keep it like as neutral as possible. Go back and try that again. We can also use our body language to build relationships. I know that sounds crazy, but active listening is done a lot with our body language. So I'm talking like when you're listening to a student like individually share something with you where they're just talking about themselves. Maybe it's in morning meeting. Maybe you are like repairing something that happened with like, a blow up with one of your students. You're doing active listening. So that might mean like, you're giving eye contact, your body is relaxed. Maybe you're leaning in a little bit. It's just kind of like relaxed body language to show that you are listening. Versus like if I just got onto a kid for, getting in a fight at recess, I can use like that loose body language versus like me sitting up and being rigid. Like this shows that like if I'm using body language like this, I have my eyes up, like my eyebrows up, I have kind of like a look of like distaste. I'm being rigid. What is that communicating to my student while they're having like a hard time? That I'm probably not listening to them. I probably don't care what they have to say. We can also use that body language like during instruction with like a whole group. Did, your mini lesson, your direct instruction, and you gave your kids directions for what to do next. You told them to get their notebooks out and open up to page 45 in their textbooks and go. Use that moment to employ some of that body language, some of that nonverbal communication to show your students that you are holding them to that expectation by watching, by listening with your relaxed body language. Those are the types of things that students are going to pick up on. She gave me the instructions and she's making sure that we are meeting those expectations. She's watching and she's listening to make sure that we follow through. We're going to talk about power struggles later in this episode, but we also want to be aware that sometimes our body language, especially culturally, can be threatening. So we want to make sure that our body language is non-threatening to de-escalate, to build relationships, to avoid power struggles. So some good rules of thumb is that like when you're talking to a student, like especially if you're like having a hard conversation with them, you're redirecting, you want to seem non-threatening, is get side by side to them. Instead of standing like shoulder to shoulder, squaring up with them, side by side is a lot less threatening. You also don't want to be like looming over a student. So like, especially like our smaller students, like standing over them is like literally you're dominating your power over them. So get eye level with them if you can. And then after you give a directive, again, I'm going to talk about this later in power struggles. When you give a directive, you want to be sure there are times when you want to watch to make sure that they follow through with that directive. And then there's also times like if you notice that they're escalating, that you want to give your directive and then move on, like physically remove yourself from the situation. I know my Patreon girlies know that because we've talked about that a lot in the spring. So sometimes like I said, giving that whole group direction, you want your students to see that you are watching. But sometimes you sitting there watching them, like especially if you're redirecting a student, can seem like you're trying to engage in a power struggle. You're like, do it, I dare you. Like that's not the kind of message that we want to deliver to our students. Our body language can also show like if we're in control of the classroom or not. So having like relaxed body language, like our shoulders and our arms are loose. Those are the types of things that are going to communicate that we're calm and that we're still in control. However, if we're starting to get like frantic and we're flailing our arms around and we're like pacing back and forth, Like even me just doing those subtle things sitting right here is showing like a very different energy level, a very different like anxiety level versus when I was just being calm and had neutral body language. So for like some cultural watch out fors, those one size fit all rules, like look at me when I'm talking to you, don't you raise your voice at me, stuff like that. Like I'm not saying it's okay to do those things, but I am saying like if that's a common thing that you find yourself saying in your classroom, you might need to like examine why that is. Also keep in mind things like eye contact, code switching, volume, slang, things like that. You kind of need to keep those things in mind too, like especially if that's a common thing that you're like dealing with at school. Like try to see if you can figure out like why that might be a common thing. What are like some cultural implications there? All right, now let's talk proximity. So like how physically close you are to students. We can use proximity, like it's even like an accommodation listed in like IEPs and 504s and stuff. Proximity can be used to like redirect. So like instead of like calling across the classroom at someone, you can go and stand by them. Like you don't even have to do anything. You don't have to look at them. You don't even have to address them, but just going and standing near them, like making the intentional move shows that like, I see what you're doing. You're not supposed to be doing that. Please get it together without me having to like embarrass you or say anything. You can do the tap on the desk, but just standing near a student, especially if you feel them like starting to escalate, can do wonders for like quick, swift redirection. I'm not saying that like standing near a student is going to solve your behavior problems, but what I am saying is that like it's a first line of defense, standing near them to see if they can get it together before you have to come in and like verbally redirect or impose a consequence or impose a correction. And then we also want to watch our proximity whenever you're like redirecting a student. Again, you want to be like side by side. If you have to be close to a student, you want to keep your voice low. You don't want to draw attention. Like you can get close to them, but again, stand side by side, standing face to face and like being inside someone's bubble. Everyone has different, like no matter what their culture is going to have like different size proximity bubbles, like personal space bubbles. Like getting inside someone's personal space bubble can feel like intrusive or aggressive. So just be mindful of that. Like whenever you are redirecting a student, I think a good rule of thumb is like arm's length. Okay, now let's talk about our verbal communication, like our language, like the words that we actually speak. So a great rule of thumb, I actually did learn this in college, is that whenever you're giving like expectations to students, tell them what to do. So at the beginning of the year, like whenever we're coming up with like our classroom rules, I teach my students that I want them to come, like they do it in groups. I can talk about that later in the summer if you guys want to, like how I do that in my classroom. But I always tell my students that I want them to come up with our classroom rules in like what to do language. So instead of saying like no running, we say something like walk safely. That's going to eliminate like any gray area, especially, whenever you have those students that are like, well, you said no running, I wasn't running. What's our expectation? To walk safely. Is grittying walking safely? No. So that's like an easy swap that you can do in your classroom to have like more clear, concise language that's going to improve your behavior management. Your classroom management is using what to do language. Another thing that you can do is guiding versus lecturing whenever you are redirecting your students. There's so much to unpack there. I have an audio series from like in the spring over on Patreon if you want to know more about this. But whenever you're redirecting students, the lecturing, like the going on and on about why we shouldn't be talking in the hallways, and you guys know this is the third time that I told you, they're not listening to you. They're not listening to you. All you're doing is devaluing your voice. When you speak, your students should know, oh, my teacher's speaking, I need to listen. But if you're constantly like lecturing them, they're gonna tune you out. Like your words are going down in value. Last thing you want as a teacher. So instead of like lecturing your students on why they shouldn't be doing, whatever behavior, we're asking guiding questions to like repeat the expectations. This is going to give you like that growth in behavior management. This is where you're going to improve student behaviors throughout your school year. So an example of this would be like, say a student comes in and sits down in your classroom, they just got to class and they sit down and they're just like chilling. They don't get their workout. They don't read the morning message. They don't start their warm up. They're just sitting there with nothing out, like a bump on a log. And so if you go over there, get your warm up out. You've been here since August. You know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Like instead of lecturing, you can go up to them and say, what are you supposed to be doing? And they're probably going to repeat to you, work on my warm up. That tells you, one, they know what they're supposed to be doing. Two, there's no room for confusion there. Three, that gives you a next steps for what to do next. Great, get your warm up out. I'll be back to check on you in just a minute. Like easy, you're done. And what I mean by improving behavior over time is so now whenever that student comes in tomorrow, their chances of sitting and not doing anything whenever they sit down at their desk when they're supposed to be working on their warm-up, now the chances of that happening are so much less. And like my personal pet peeve is when people say, why are we talking? Why are you doing that? Why are you messing with him? Like that's a rhetorical question, and students don't understand rhetorical questions. They're going to answer you. They're going to say, well, he was, and y'all know how this goes. Like now you guys are arguing in the hallway back and forth. They give you an explanation. And do you want to hear that explanation as to why they're talking in the hall? No, you want them to be quiet. You just like invited them to start speaking. Like this is like my biggest pet peeve. So, say you walk to pick up your kids from PE, they're being crazy in the hallway. Instead of launching into, why are we talking? You could just say, like, what's our expectation? It's one word, silent. They're supposed to be silent. They get their lives together, they're silent, and you get out of there. Like, they fix it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know in a perfect world, that's how it would go. It's not as simple as all that, but do you see how much like crap it cuts out whenever you just say, what's the expectation? Like, you're asking a guiding question to get them there instead of launching into the lecture. I'm worked up right now. Okay, now let's talk about like a mindset shift that we're gonna have whenever it comes to language. This is one of my favorite quotes that have to do with like classroom management and mindset shifts around teaching, is that whenever you're giving consequences, you want to, like, your goal is to improve behavior, not to impose your power. Like, first year me in 2013 really needed to hear that like whenever you're redirecting behavior, you're giving consequences, whatever it is, your goal is to improve behavior, not to show that you are in charge, which like I was really guilty of because I was just like grasping for control, trying to regain control of my classroom. And so I thought the way to do that was by imposing my power, showing that I was in charge. But all that was really doing in my classroom is showing that I was a tyrant. I was trying to be a tyrant. So were my relationships great? No. Was my behavior management great? No. Were my students learning anything about like how to get better with their behavior? No. I was just being an ass. If anything, we want to show that we have control over our classroom because we're like the adults in charge. Like, we need to have a semblance of control in our classrooms. We do need to be control all the time, but there's a difference between having control and having power over your students, if that makes sense. So a lot of times what that looks like in your classroom is like choosing your battles. And I don't mean choosing your battles by letting little things go, because if you saw my social media post the other day about letting little things go stacks up like debt. We want to let things go that aren't going to have an effect or a consequence in our classrooms later. So whenever you're like redirecting a student and you say something like, look at me when I'm talking to you, there is such a thing as like, no eye contact can mean disrespect. But here in this situation, you're wanting compliance over like actually improving their behavior, if that makes sense. Like, instead, what that might do, like, no matter the example or the scenario, what that can do a lot of times is trigger defiance, students wanting to like oppose you. Another thing to consider whenever you're wanting to like redirect your students is using what Teach Like a Champion calls, if you've listened to my other, episodes before, you know that I love the School of Thought, Teach Like a Champion. It's a book. Is using something called economy of language. So what that means is, like, instead of launching into a lecture about how we shouldn't be, speaking in the hallway, we could say something like voices. And that teaches your students, like, if you've taught them, your routines and procedures, that teaches your students that they have like 3 seconds to get their voices together. They need to check their voices and get silent. So like that same example of picking your kids up from PE and your class is a hot mess and they're talking and being all crazy, you could say voices in 3, voices in 2. Notice how I'm changing my tone. Notice how I'm using my facial expressions. Notice how I'm using economy of language, just one word, instead of launching into the, why are we talking? Y'all know that, blah, 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 blah. What that's going to do is it's going to build consistency. So that means that every time students know exactly what to do. It's less energy on your part, less energy on their part, and they're going to do it less often because they know exactly what's going to happen. And if they're not silent by one, consequences. Like, it's predictable. They know exactly what to do. It also cuts the chaos. You're not adding more voice, more chaos into the chaos that's already happening with your class in the hallway. Like I said, though, doing something like that, you have to teach your students what words you're going to use, so you could like roll that into your routines and procedures that you teach at the beginning of the year, right? Another Teach Like a Champion strategy that comes with that is having students redo it. Like, it's such a nice, neutral redirection. And it's going to help you avoid that power struggle and the lecturing. So say you have a student that's just constantly blurting out. He blurts out, you look at him, try that again. Oh, raises his hand. Like, yeah, it's not going to work perfectly every single time, but he's going to start knowing, like, with consistency, that you're going to say, try it again, do it again, do it again. And they're going to get tired of redoing it. They're just going to wind up eventually doing it right the first time. Like, I would say by like about October, they're going to start doing it on their own. And guess what? October, your class will start running itself on its own. Teach Like a Champion also recommends using words like, I need you to. So instead of like walking up to a student and you're going to write a note to their parents and their calendar, like as like a consequence, you're going to say something like, I need you to get your calendar, instead of walking up to them, looming over them and saying, get your calendar out. You need to get your calendar out. Notice all the things I just changed: my tone, my body language, my proximity. You could say, I need you to get your calendar out. Like, it's so much more neutral and like de-escalating, and you're still getting the same outcome, if that makes sense. So with that, let's talk about de-escalation. Now, by de-escalation, I mean like the mild to moderate behaviors. I'm not talking about the severe situations. I am not CPI certified, so just do with this information what you will. This is like general classroom de-escalation, gen ed de-escalation. So like I said, with those silent redirections is using that proximity control. So if you have a student who you know is like pretty volatile, or just in general, you want to like redirect a student without causing a scene, is going near them wherever they are. You keep doing what it is that you're doing and just standing near them while you continue to teach or whatever it is that you're doing. Another thing that you can do while you're redirecting is reminding a student, like if a student starts to get amped up, keep your tone neutral, keep your facial expression neutral, keep your words neutral, and remind them that they're just doing a correction. They're not having a consequence. Like at the beginning of the year with my 5th graders last year, I had a student who had a really hard time unlearning that every time he was being directed, he wasn't in trouble. He would constantly walk into my class every single morning talking, when my expectation was that clearly we are silent whenever we come into my class. And I would have him go back out, try it again. You're not in trouble. Just go back out and try it again. Like, it's not like I would have to like talk him off the ledge very neutrally, and I would have to say the same thing every single time. And eventually he started to learn that she's not mad at me. I'm not in trouble. I know what she's gonna say. She's gonna say, I'm not in trouble. I'm just redoing it. Okay, and then the next level, like whenever you are redirecting a student, you went in, you already had them try to correct it, they're still not working with you. I talk about this on social media and Patreon all the time. You need to drop your directive and then get out of there. So what I mean by that is that if you tell a student like, you're supposed to be working on your warm-up, I'm gonna give you a few minutes to get out your green notebook, read the morning message, and start your warm-up. I'll be back in a few minutes to check on you. Get out of there. Don't stand there and be like, start your warm-up. Like, you're asking them to start a power struggle with you. Like, you're trying to impose your power. And obviously the student is upset, they're having a hard time, whatever it is, they're gonna come back at you. Or they're gonna shut down, and then you're left standing there looking like an idiot. So instead, you can give them a very low effort way to get started, like remove the barrier to entry, just get out your notebook. Get out your notebook and a pencil, something like that. Get out your notebook and a pencil, I'll be back in a few minutes, check on you. Leave, linger around, kind of keep your eye on them, but not in like an intimidating way, just like out of the corner of your eye, very sneaky, checking on them, inconspicuous, and then go back over in a few minutes, hey, thanks. Like, that's it, and you're done. Like, you de-escalated, there's no consequence, like no confrontation necessary, and they're starting their work, which is the goal anyways. Okay, so let's say that you go over there and the student did not start their warm-up, and it's not because of like lack of ability, like that they know how to start their warm-up, they've been doing this since August, whatever it is, and you're not asking the world of them, like all they have to do is like write the sentence starter from the board or something like that. Like, just take their abilities into consideration with these situations, but this is where you don't want to deliver your consequence, but it's kind of veiled as a choice. So it sounds something like this. Okay, so you can either start your warm-up just by writing the sentence starter, or you're gonna have to do this during your lunch. Like, notice I'm still saying neutral. I'm not imposing my power. I'm not, intimidating them or escalating the situation. I'm just giving them a very low lift choice to make. And it's also still using like that guiding strategy. You're helping them choose among these two choices. Do I start here, or do I escalate the situation further when it's unnecessary? Now let's talk about, like, maybe it's more than just not starting your warm-up. Maybe it's something like a student flipping a desk. Like, obviously you're getting admin or the appropriate people involved in the situation, but there are so many times, especially like me in 2013 when I was a first-year teacher, there are so many times when I would make the situation worse. I would escalate the situation by like the nonverbals. Like, I would think like a big action like that needed a big consequence, which when a student is having a moment like that, that's not the time to give a consequence. That would be like if you got in a wreck and the cop walked up to you while you're like standing on the curb outside of your wrecked car and was like, here's your defensive driving course, get started on it now. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that's not the time or the place to give a consequence. When a student is being explosive like that, they're having a meltdown, they're having a car crash moment, stop talking. Like, as a teacher, stop talking. You don't want to add anything, any chaos, any noise, any stimulus to the situation. You want to stay neutral. You want to have calm body language. I literally will will myself to walk slower, move slower. And that's me trying to exercise control over myself and my classroom. So if a student flips a desk or something explosive like that, your goal is to keep your students safe. So whether that means, like shepherding them to one side of the classroom, getting them to exit the classroom, and your other goal is to like exercise calm over the situation. You're not reacting, you're not giving a consequence, you're calling admin, you're working with your other students, you're keeping your kids safe. Your students start freaking out, that's why you're modeling calm. You can even explicitly say, if your students are freaking out, they're gonna be looking at you to see what your reaction is, and they're gonna pick up on that. I guarantee if a student flips a desk or does something explosive like that, your student's inclination is probably gonna be to freak out, and you have to like train that out of them. Just because he flips a desk doesn't mean that we freak out. We can still stay calm and be in charge of ourselves. Another way to like de-escalate a situation, either like preventatively or in the moment, is removing the audience, like a peer audience. Some students are literally like triggered by having their peers watch them get in trouble. They're going to escalate the situation simply because there are people around. Yes, I know my internal like dialogue is telling me like they're already embarrassing themselves. Like, what's the problem? I know, but that's not the way they see it. This is a situation where you can do the silent redirection, the side by side, the proximity control, the lowered voice, the neutral body language. Those are things that peers are going to pick up on. Okay, and now let's talk about avoiding power struggles. Like, I know it's so much easier said than done, but like Brittany needed a class on this in 2013, like an intensive, because avoiding power struggles, that was one of my biggest issues. And I'm gonna break my own rule here and I'm gonna launch into don'ts. Remember I said we wanna use the what to do language? Let me tell you what not to do. So I am breaking my own rule here. Don't ask those damn rhetorical questions. Ask what the expectation is. Don't snatch things out of kids' hands. Ask them to give it to you. Don't loom over them and have threatening body language and eye contact. Don't consequence your way into compliance. Offer those choices. Don't embarrass them. I know they're embarrassing themselves, but don't give them an audience. Don't try to get the last word in. They're kids. We are smart, college-educated, capable adults. We're not going to argue with kids. Don't take the bait. Stop at your first expectation. You gave a clear expectation, repeat that. Don't let the 8-year-old take you down the spiral, okay? All right, now let's talk about modeling our own emotional self-regulation, which this one is really twofold because not only are you modeling, which is gonna exercise control over your classroom and your students' emotions, but it also helps you, because you're literally regulating your own emotions, which is gonna help you make better choices. So remember, we wanna be warm but firm. New teachers, firm does not mean mean. What students want is a warm but firm teacher. They think they want the cool, permissive one. Warm and firm is what students want. They just don't know it. They want to know what to expect from you, and they want to know that you're going to hold them to those expectations, but you're still warm about it. Know that there is power in being calm and relaxed and modeling like a neutral tone and body language. Those things are good for you, and it is showing your students so much. Try to control your voice, your tone, your pitch, your volume. Remember my friend that I was talking about, how he starts talking like this? Try to have some control over that. And then whenever you are finding yourself feeling triggered, try to pause before you react. Not everything needs an immediate response. You're gonna make better choices if you pause and get your thoughts together and get your body together before you launch in. My therapist taught me that we have paths in our brains, neural pathways. And whenever you make one choice over and over, if your natural inclination is to have a crazy tone, raise your voice, raise the volume, have crazy body language, that path gets carved deeper and deeper into your brain. And so automatically you're going to go down that path, right? So you have to train yourself to pause and regulate your emotions, take a few deep breaths before you react. And it's going to feel really hard to not go down that super deep carved pathway because you're having to make your own new path. It really takes some intentionality there. But you guys know what happens next. The more you don't choose the deep carved out old pathway and the more you choose the new calm one, that path gets carved deeper and this one starts to level out and get overgrown and this becomes your new path. So it does get easier with time. Okay, I feel really good about the stuff that we talked about today. This is such a slept on topic that has huge payoff, and I feel it's kind of the elephant in the room that no one really addresses with how to be better about how we talk to our students. We all know that some teachers talk really crazy to their kids. So making some of these small tweaks, just knowing what the effects are is going to have such a huge payoff for you in your classroom. If you like this and you want more, join us on the post-dismissal debrief over at my link in Patreon. It's got an extra session at the end where I'm sharing examples. I'm spilling tea on some of the crazy things that I've seen teachers do, anonymously, of course, but it's it really helped me reflect and learn and get better. And then also we're just yapping over there. Just some teacher camaraderie. Also, stay tuned for the next episode. It is over on my social medias. This is my most viral topic consistently. Morning routine, that famous slow start that I showed back in 2023, and then our pack up routine, the notoriously most chaotic part of the day. So we're gonna do a deep dive on how to get those things perfect, what all I've done in my classroom, what I've tried, options for you, don't miss it. And then also don't forget that you can log this episode as your professional development that you did over the summer, because not only are we talking about classroom management, we're talking about building relationships. So when your admin wants to know what you're doing to build your relationships, you did professional development work this summer. Okay, I'll see you guys next time or in the post-dismissal debrief.